Support for today's episode comes from Amazon. Amazon is working toward a carbon free energy future, doing more with less, investing where it matters most, and supporting communities where we operate. Taiwan is guaranteeing chipmakers power, not just land. Taiwan Power Company's chairman put the strategy in 5 words this year: electricity is competitiveness. The government is now acting on that line in ways that go well beyond a slogan, and TSMC isn't waiting to see if it works. Taiwan Power Company, the state-run grid operator known as Taipower, expects semiconductor demand to climb from roughly 52 billion kilowatt-hours in 2026 to 80 billion kilowatt-hours by 2030 and 110 billion kilowatt-hours by 2035, with peak demand rising from about 7 gigawatts GW today to 14.6 gigawatts by the middle of the next decade, according to figures from a Taipower chairman Tseng Wensheng presentation titled Resilience Blueprint: Power Resilience and International Competitiveness. Taipower has officially framed grid reliability as a core piece of the island's industrial competitiveness, not simply a utility planning matter. That same presentation projects reserve margins dipping to roughly 7% to 8% in 2028 and 2029, a tighter window than some other official reserve margin reporting has shown for the same years, and the figure is worth attributing specifically to that internal planning document rather than treating it as settled consensus. Large power plants take 6 to 8 years to build, Taipower Vice President Cheng Ching-hung has noted, against 1 to 2 year fab expansion cycles, which is why the company says planning has to run years ahead of demand rather than react to it. A single fab can ask for a fifth of an entire science park's power. The scale involved is unusual even by industrial standards. Each advanced wafer fab requires roughly 200 megawatts to operate, and Taipower has said some individual facilities outside designated industrial zones have requested up to 20% of an entire science park's power allocation for one building. Some estimates put TSMC's own share of Taiwan's total electricity consumption at close to 10%. That concentration mirrors a dynamic playing out in U.S. grid regions, where a handful of large facilities can request more capacity than an entire regional queue was built to absorb. Except in Taiwan's case, the government is coordinating supply well before applications like TSMC's Longtan expansion are finalized. The government is freezing industrial rates while household bills rise. Taiwan's Ministry of Economic Affairs held industrial electricity rates unchanged from October 2025 through March 2026, while livelihood rates, covering residential customers and small commercial users, rose an average of 3.12% per kilowatt-hour over the same period. The overall average rate increase across all customer classes came to just 0.71%, reflecting how narrowly the increase was targeted. Taipower is absorbing the resulting fuel cost gap on its own balance sheet while it waits for a broader rate review later this year. The policy is explicit: shield manufacturing, including the semiconductor sector, from the volatility of global energy markets, even at the cost of concentrating that volatility onto residential and small business ratepayers instead. TSMC isn't relying on the grid alone either. Roughly 35 miles off Changhua County, 111 wind turbines feed their entire output to a single customer under a deal TSMC signed with Danish developer Ørsted in 2020, committing to buy the complete 920 megawatt production of the Greater Changhua offshore wind project rather than a partial share. Corporate renewable contracts of this kind carry their own delivery risk when signed without firm construction guarantees. But TSMC's arrangement was structured to lock in the entire project rather than compete for capacity after the fact. It was, at signing, the largest corporate renewable power purchase agreement ever recorded. 5 years later, with Taiwan's grid straining under AI-driven fab expansion, that commitment reads as an early bet on controlling power supply directly, made well before the grid pressure that would justify it had actually arrived. None of this resolves the underlying tension. Grid readiness increasingly functions as a timeline variable in corporate planning, not just a cost input, and Taiwan's grid remains heavily fossil dependent, with fossil fuels supplying more than 87% of electricity in the first 8 months of 2025, according to Reuters. TSMC has pushed its 100% renewable energy target up a decade, to 2040 and raised its 2030 renewable target to 60%, while industry groups the company leads have publicly asked the government to address what they've called an unprecedented power supply risk. For executives weighing exposure to Taiwan's chip supply chain, the reassurance that power will be met is coming from the same officials managing the reserve margin math described above. That is a more specific and more testable claim than it sounds, and one worth tracking against actual capacity additions rather than taking on faith. Sustainability Soundbites energy coverage is sponsored by Amazon. Visit the link in our show notes to learn more about Amazon's spotlight on energy. For sponsorship opportunities with Environment and Energy Leader, please reach out to a member of our team.